They told me not to come. Not with anger, not with apology, just casual certainty. My mother's voice on the phone, light as discussing dinner plans. Maya, we've been thinking, and honestly it might be easier if you skip Derek's wedding. You know how you can be. It's his day, and well, we don't want any tension. My father laughed in the background, that dismissive chuckle I'd heard my entire life. Yeah, let's keep it simple, sweetheart. Besides, you're always so busy with work anyway. They hung up before I could respond, and in that silence something inside me finally cracked open. Not broke. Opened. Because what they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to notice, was that I'd already paid for everything. The venue, the flowers, the band, the cake. Even Hannah's custom dress from that boutique in Seattle. Every single detail of Derek's perfect day had my signature on the invoice. They just assumed someone else handled it. They always did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 32 years old, and I built a tech consulting firm from absolutely nothing. No venture capital, no family loans, no safety net. Just me, a laptop, and an unhealthy amount of coffee in a studio apartment that smelled like the Thai restaurant downstairs. ClearPath Solutions started in that cramped space 8 years ago. Now we've got an office in downtown Portland with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River, 12 employees, and clients across 3 states. I help small businesses untangle their operational chaos, build systems that actually work, streamline everything from inventory to payroll. It's satisfying work, solving puzzles that matter, watching companies transform from scattered to strategic. But somewhere along the way, while I was building something real, my family decided I'd become something else entirely. Not Maya the entrepreneur. Not Maya the problem solver. Just Maya the convenient resource. The one who always has extra. The one who won't say no. The one whose own life doesn't count as much because it doesn't look like theirs. It didn't start with the wedding. It started 9 years ago when Derek called me at 2 in the morning. His car had died on the side of Highway 26, and he needed a tow. $400. I wired it immediately, drove out to pick him up, bought him breakfast while we waited for the mechanic. He thanked me, promised he'd pay me back, and I believed him. That money never came, but something else did. Another call, another crisis, another amount that seemed small enough to overlook. My mother needed help with property taxes after my father's hours got cut at the warehouse. Sophie needed textbooks for her junior year. My father's dental work wasn't covered by insurance. Derek's security deposit on a new apartment. Each time I told myself this was temporary. This was family. This was what people with resources did for people they loved. But I started noticing patterns. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody wondered if these requests were adding up. Nobody seemed curious about my life beyond whether I could solve theirs. When I opened my office, I sent out invitations to a small celebration. Champagne, catered food, a chance to see what I'd built. My mother said she had a hair appointment. My father said Portland traffic gave him headaches. Derek said he'd try to make it but never showed. Sophie came for 20 minutes, took a selfie, and left. The champagne went flat. The food went home with my employees. And I smiled through it, told myself it didn't matter, that I was too independent to need validation. But here's the truth I didn't want to admit. I did need it. I needed someone to see me. Not my bank account, not my ability to fix things, but me. The person who worked 70-hour weeks to build something meaningful. The person who still got nervous before client presentations. The person who sometimes sat in her car after site visits and cried from exhaustion. I wanted them to ask, just once, "How are you, Maya?" Not "What can you do for us?" Just "How are you?" That question never came. Instead, what came was Derek's engagement announcement, delivered over Sunday dinner at the house in Beaverton. He and Hannah had been dating for 2 years and honestly I liked her. She was warm, funny, worked as a graphic designer, and seemed to genuinely care about my brother. When he proposed, I was happy for them. Genuinely happy. My mother cried, my father ordered expensive wine, and Sophie immediately started planning her maid of honor duties. I raised my glass, offered congratulations, and felt something close to hope. Maybe this would be different. Maybe this milestone would bring us closer. Let me participate as family, not just funding. Then the request started. Not from Derek or Hannah, but from my mother. She called on a Wednesday afternoon while I was in a meeting. I stepped out thinking it was urgent. Her voice had that practiced sweetness, the tone she used when she wanted something but needed me to think it was my idea. Maya, honey, Derek and Hannah found the most incredible venue. Riverside Gardens Estate, right on the lake. It's absolutely stunning. But the deposit is due Friday, and with everything happening they're stretched a bit thin. I was thinking, since you've been doing so well with your business, maybe you'd want to contribute? It would mean the world to Derek. I should have asked how much. I should have asked why they couldn't afford it. I should have asked if anyone else was contributing. Instead, I heard myself say, "Of course. Send me the details." The deposit was $6,000. I paid it that evening. My mother texted back a single sentence. "You're a lifesaver." Not "thank you." Not "we appreciate this." Just a statement of utility. I saved their life. That's what I was for. The next call came 4 days later. The photographer they wanted was booked unless they could secure him with a full payment up front. $3,500. I paid it. Then the florist, who required a deposit for the specific peonies Hannah had her heart set on. Then the band, a jazz quartet that Derek insisted would make the reception elegant. Then the invitations, custom letterpress on cotton paper. Then the cake, for tears with hand-piped sugar flowers. Then the rehearsal dinner, because my father suggested ringside steakhouse and someone had to reserve the private room. Every request arrived the same way. Casual, urgent, wrapped in language that made refusal seem selfish. "It's just this one thing. It would really help them out. You know how important this is." And every time I said yes. Not because I wanted to, because I didn't know how to stop. Because saying no felt like admitting I didn't care, didn't love them, didn't understand what family meant. So I kept my credit card ready and my questions too. Myself. But I wasn't stupid. I'd been burned before, back when I first started making real money. I'd lent my father $12,000 for what he called a business opportunity. It evaporated. He never explained where it went, and when I asked about repayment, he acted offended that I'd even bring it up. That taught me something crucial. Generosity without documentation becomes mythology. People rewrite history to suit their comfort. So this time I created a system. I opened a dedicated account, labeled it clearly, kept every receipt, every invoice, every email confirmation. I wasn't trying to hold anything over anyone. I just wanted proof. Proof that I'd shown up even if nobody noticed. Proof that I'd cared even when it wasn't reciprocated. The spreadsheet grew. Line after line, vendor after vendor. By April, 3 months before the wedding, I'd spent $41,000. By May it was $63,000. By the week of the wedding, the number had climbed to $87,000. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? "Hey, just so you know, I've funded your entire celebration?" It felt grotesque to mention, like I was asking for applause. So I stayed quiet, managed logistics between conference calls, coordinated with vendors during my lunch breaks. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And waited for someone to notice. They didn't. What they did instead was plan the seating chart without me. I found out by accident when Sophie sent a group text showing off the hand calligraph table assignments. She'd photographed them all, proud of her artistic contribution. I zoomed in, searching for my name. Table 18. The overflow table. Positioned near the kitchen doors, far from the family tables, surrounded by distant cousins and plus ones of people I'd never met. My mother was at table 1 with my father. Derek and Hannah obviously at the head table. Sophie at table 2 with the bridal party. I stared at that photo for a long time, sitting in my car outside a client's office. The spring rain drummed against the windshield, blurring the Portland skyline into soft gray shapes. I wasn't angry. I was something else. Confirmed. They'd made it explicit. I wasn't part of the inner circle. I was auxiliary. Optional. There if convenient, absent if complicated. I thought about texting Sophie, asking if it was a mistake. But I already knew it wasn't. This was intentional. This was how they saw me. The phone call came 2 weeks before the wedding. I was reviewing a software implementation proposal, highlighter in hand, When my mother's name lit up my screen, I answered, still distracted, still thinking about database migrations. Maya, we need to talk about the wedding. I set down the highlighter. Her tone was different. Careful. Scripted. Okay, I said. She sighed, that long-suffering exhale she used when she wanted me to know something was difficult for her. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it might be better if you didn't come. Silence. Complete ringing silence. I waited for the punchline, the explanation, the softening qualifier. Nothing came. What? I finally managed. It's just, you know how you can be, Maya. You're so focused on work, so intense. And Derek's wedding is going to be emotional. And we just want to keep things light. Simple. We don't want any tension or awkwardness. You understand, right? It's his day. In the background, I heard my father laugh. Not a malicious laugh, just casual amusement, like she'd said something mildly funny. Then his voice, distant but clear. Yeah, let's keep it simple, sweetheart. Besides, you're always so busy with work anyway. You probably don't even want to take the time off. My hand tightened around the phone. My entire body felt cold, then hot, then numb. I've paid for the wedding, I said quietly. My mother paused. What? The venue. The photographer. The flowers. The band. The cake. The invitations. The rehearsal dinner. All of it. I've paid for all of it. Another pause, longer this time. Then, in a tone that suggested I was being dramatic, she said, Well, we didn't ask you to do that, Maya. That was your choice. And honestly, this just proves our point. You're too involved. Too controlling. Derek and Hannah want their day to feel organic, not like some corporate event you're managing. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't form words. She kept talking. We'll pay you back eventually, of course. But right now, we just think it's best if you give them space. Let them have their moment without, complications. Complications. That's what I was. Not a sister. Not a daughter. Complication. We've got to go, my mother said, her voice brightening like we'd just discussed weekend plans. But thank you for understanding. You're always so reasonable. She hung up. I sat there in my office, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. Outside, the city moved on. People walked to lunch. Cars honked. Construction crews jackhammered through concrete. Inside, I felt something fundamental shift. For years, I'd bent myself into shapes that fit their needs. Shrunk my successes so they didn't feel inadequate. Swallowed my hurt so they didn't feel guilty. Funded their happiness so they didn't feel lack. And in return, they decided I was too much trouble to invite to a wedding I'd paid for. The anger came slowly, not as fire but as ice. Clear, cold, clarifying ice. I opened my laptop, pulled up the wedding expense account, and stared at the dashboard. Every transaction listed, every vendor connected, every payment scheduled. And at the top, in small gray text, a detail they'd never bothered to check. Account holder and approval authority Maya Chan. Sole signatory required for all disbursements. They didn't just let me pay. They needed me to approve every single charge. And I hadn't processed the final payments yet. The band's second half, due the week of the wedding. The venue's final balance, due 48 hours before the event. The caterer's remaining invoice, due the morning of the ceremony. The cake, the flowers, the transportation, all waiting for my approval. I'd been planning to clear them that week, to make sure everything went smoothly. But now, sitting in the cold light of my office, I realized something. They'd uninvited me from an event that couldn't happen without me. And they had no idea. I didn't call them back. Didn't send an angry text or demand an explanation. I simply closed my laptop, picked up my phone and texted my assistant. Clear my calendar for the next 3 days. Family emergency. Then I walked out of the office, drove to the Pearl District, and sat in my loft watching the rain streak down the windows. The city blurred into watercolor shapes, and I let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for years. Not just the wedding invitation being revoked. Everything. Every dismissal, every forgotten birthday. Every time my achievements were met with silence while Derek's mediocre accomplishments earned celebration. Every phone call that started with a request and ended without asking how I was doing. Every family dinner where I sat quiet, listening to them discuss their lives while mine went unmentioned, as if success without a husband and children didn't qualify as a real existence. My phone buzzed throughout the evening. Sophie sent a string of messages about bridesmaid dress fittings, completely oblivious to the conversation I'd had with our mother. She added a photo of Hannah laughing in a bridal boutique, surrounded by tulle and champagne glasses, captioned "Best day ever with my favorite bride." I stared at that image, at the joy I'd funded but wasn't welcome to witness. Derek texted around 8, a message clearly crafted by Hannah, because my brother had never used that many exclamation points in his life. "Can't wait for you to see everything come together. It's going to be absolutely magical." He had no idea. None of them did. They moved through their preparations like actors on a stage I'd built, completely unaware that the person controlling the lights was about to walk out of the theater. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop again, and began documenting everything. Not for revenge, not yet. Just for clarity. I needed to see it all laid out, needed to understand the full scope of what I'd given and what I'd received in return. The spreadsheet grew across my screen, each line a small grief. The engagement party I'd hosted at my loft because they said a restaurant was too expensive. I'd spent $2,000 on catering, decorations, a custom cocktail menu. My mother gave a toast thanking God for bringing Hannah into their lives. She didn't mention who paid for the celebration. The wedding shower Sophie organized but couldn't fund. I covered the venue rental, the brunch, the party favors. $1,800. I wasn't invited to help plan it, just to finance it. Derek's bachelor party in Seattle. My father said it would mean everything if Derek could have a real send-off with his friends. I paid for the hotel rooms, the steakhouse dinner, the bar tab. $3,200. I wasn't included in any of the photos they posted, just the Venmo requests. The list continued, item after item, moment after moment where my wallet was welcome but I wasn't. And beneath the wedding expenses, I found older entries, years of smaller requests that had accumulated into something staggering. My father's truck repair for $1,000. My mother's credit card debt, $7,500. Sophie's study abroad program deposit, $3,000. Derek's real estate licensing courses, $2,000. His failed cryptocurrency investments that he'd begged me to cover when they tanked, $9,000. The family vacation to Cannon Beach 2 summers ago, where they invited me last minute, after I'd agreed to pay for the rental house. $6,000 for a week where I worked remotely while they enjoyed the ocean, and my mother complained that I wasn't being present enough. The total sat at the bottom of the spreadsheet, a number that made my stomach turn. Over the past 9 years, I'd given my family $243,000. Not loaned, given, because none of it had ever been repaid, and most of it had never even been acknowledged. I sat back, the wine untouched, staring at that number. $250,000. That was a house. That was retirement security. That was freedom. Instead, it was a monument to my inability to say no, and their willingness to keep asking. The rain had stopped. Portland settled into that peculiar spring twilight, where the sky held light long past when it should have gone dark. I thought about calling my best friend Alex, telling them everything, asking for perspective. But I already knew what they'd say. Alex had been telling me for years that my family was using me. I defended them, made excuses, insisted it was more complicated than it looked from the outside. Now, sitting alone in my apartment with a spreadsheet that read like an indictment, I couldn't find a single excuse that held weight. The wedding was in 12 days. I pulled up my calendar, looked at the schedule I'd carefully maintained. Final vendor confirmations, final payments, final logistics. I was the invisible project manager of an event I'd been uninvited from, and the absurdity of it hit me so hard I started laughing. Not happy laughter. The kind that borders on something darker. I'd been coordinating with Rebecca Morrison, the wedding planner, for months. She had my number saved as Maya, bride's sister, primary contact. Every question came to me. Every decision required my approval. When the florist needed to substitute ranunculus for some of the peonies due to supply issues, she called me. When the band asked about playing an extra set, she emailed me. When the venue needed to confirm the final guest count, she texted me. I was the engine making everything run, and my family had convinced themselves that the car was driving itself. I opened my email and searched for Rebecca's messages. Hundreds of them dating back 7 months. Planning timelines, vendor contracts, payment schedules, design mock-ups. In every single exchange, she addressed me as the decision maker. And in every contract, in the fine print nobody bothers reading, my name appeared as the financial guarantor. The person responsible for all charges. The person whose approval was required for services to be rendered. I'd set it up that way intentionally. After the disaster with my father's so-called business opportunity, I'd learned that controlling the money meant controlling the narrative. But I'd never planned to use that control. I'd simply wanted protection, documentation, proof that I'd contributed. Now that protection looked like something else entirely. Leverage. I spent the next 2 hours reading through every contract, every terms of service agreement, every cancellation policy. The venue required final payment 48 hours before the event, or they reserved the right to cancel and retain the deposit. The caterer needed 72 hours notice for final headcount and payment, or they'd reduce service to a basic package. The band could cancel with less than a week's notice if payment wasn't received, with no refund of the deposit. The photographer required full payment 1 week prior, or they'd release the date to other clients. The florist needed 3 days for final arrangement confirmation and payment. Every single vendor had similar terms, and every single one listed me as the contact for financial matters. My family had been treating this like a done deal, like the wedding was simply happening through some combination of Derek's charm and divine intervention. They had no idea how close everything was to unraveling, or that I was the only thing holding it together. I could stop it all with a few clicks. Freeze the payments, withdraw approval, let the vendors cancel according to their terms. The wedding would collapse, not dramatically, not with my fingerprints visible, but quietly, professionally, as vendors simply declined to provide services without confirmed payment. My family would scramble, make calls, demand answers. And they'd discover that every path led back to me. The daughter they decided was too complicated to invite. I closed the laptop and stood, walked to the window, pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city glittered. People moving through their Thursday evening, heading to dinners and bars and lives that didn't include this particular choice. Because that's what this was. A choice. I could let it go, pay the final invoices, let Derek have his perfect day, and simply not attend. Be the bigger person, the mature one, the daughter who understood that sometimes family was complicated. Or I could stop pretending that their comfort mattered more than my dignity. The next morning I woke early, made coffee, and opened my laptop with a clear head. I'd made my decision somewhere in the restless hours between midnight and dawn. I wasn't going to be vindictive. I wasn't going to send angry emails or make dramatic announcements. I was simply going to do what they'd asked. Give them space. Step back. Stop being so involved. I logged into the wedding expense account and changed a single setting. Automatic payments, currently enabled for all upcoming charges, switched to manual approval required. Every pending transaction, every scheduled payment, everything that was supposed to process automatically in the coming days, now sat in a queue waiting for my authorization. Then I closed the laptop and went to work. My Friday was consumed with a new client presentation, a small manufacturing company in Hillsborough that needed their entire inventory system rebuilt. I lost myself in the work, in solving problems that had clear solutions, in helping people who actually wanted my help. My phone stayed silent until noon when Sophie called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again 20 minutes later. Again voicemail. The third time I answered, keeping my voice professionally pleasant, the tone I used with vendors. Sophie, I'm in the middle of something. What's up? She launched into breathless excitement about the bachelorette party tomorrow. Some wine tasting tour in Willamette Valley that I apparently hadn't been informed about. We're meeting at 10 and Hannah's so excited. And oh my God, Maya, the Airbnb is so cute. It has a hot tub and everything. I waited for her to finish. That sounds great. Have fun. Silence on her end, confusion evident. You're coming, right? I sent you the details last week. I didn't receive them, I said, which was true. But regardless, I won't be able to make it. Work commitment. Maya, come on. It's one day. Can't you just skip out? This was familiar territory, the assumption that my work was flexible, optional, less important than their social plans. No, I said simply. I can't. Fine, Sophie said, her voice shifting to that martyred tone she'd perfected as a teenager. I'll tell Hannah you're too busy. Again. She hung up before I could respond. I set the phone down and returned to my presentation prep. But the interaction sat with me, festering. Too busy. Again. As if my absence was a pattern of choice rather than exclusion. As if I hadn't made space in my calendar for every family event, every request, every crisis for years. As if the one time I said no, it confirmed everything they'd already decided about me. The presentation went well. The client signed and my team celebrated with lunch at a food cart pod downtown. I smiled, toasted with locally roasted coffee, and felt the distance growing between who I was at work and who I'd been trying to be for my family. Here I was competent, respected, valued. There I was an ATM with attachment issues. That evening I went home and did something I hadn't done in months. Called Alex. They answered on the second ring, voice warm and familiar. Maya-chun. To what do I owe this shocking display of work-life balance? I laughed, some of the tension easing. Can you come over? I need to talk. Give me 30 minutes. They arrived with Thai food from our favorite place on Hawthorne, the one that knew our orders by heart. We sat on my couch, containers spread across the coffee table, and I told them everything. The wedding expenses, the uninvitation, the contracts, the leverage I suddenly held. Alex listened without interrupting, their expression shifting from surprise to anger to something like sad resignation. When I finished, they set down their pad thai and looked at me directly. What do you want to do? Not what should I do? Not what's right. What do you want? I'd been asking myself that question for 2 days, and the answer kept crystallizing into sharper focus. I want them to see me, I said quietly. Not as convenient or complicated. Just as a person who deserved better than this. Alex nodded slowly. And if they don't? If you pull this thread and everything unravels and they still don't get it? I thought about that too. Then at least I'll know. And I'll stop waiting for something that was never coming. We talked until midnight, Alex asking questions that forced me to examine my motivations, my expectations, my fears. They didn't tell me what to do, just helped me see clearly what I was already choosing. When they left, I sat alone in the quiet of my loft and opened my laptop one more time. The wedding was in 8 days. The final payments were due in stages over the next week. And I had a decision to make about each one. I started with the smallest. The transportation service, luxury vintage cars to shuttle the bridal party between locations. The final payment was due tomorrow, $500. I hovered over the approval button, then moved my cursor away. Clicked instead on Request Additional Information from Vendor. An email auto-generated, asking for updated timing details. The charge went from pending to on hold, waiting for my review. Next, the cake. $3,000 final payment due in 5 days. Same process. Requested clarification on delivery logistics. Payment on hold. The flowers for $1,000 due in 4 days. Requested confirmation of specific arrangement details. On hold. One by one, I moved through the pending charges, each time finding a legitimate question to ask, a detail to confirm, a reason to pause the automatic processing. I wasn't canceling anything. I was just asking questions. Being thorough. Making sure everything was perfect for Derek's big day. By 1 in the morning, every pending payment sat in limbo, waiting for my approval after vendor responses. And I'd set my email to auto-delay responses to vendor inquiries by 24 hours, giving me time to think about each one. It was strategic, careful, and completely within my rights as the account holder. I wasn't being destructive. I was being discerning. The way they should have been before assuming my money was theirs to spend. I finally closed the laptop and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in weeks. Saturday morning my phone erupted. Not with calls from family, but from Rebecca Morrison, the wedding planner. 3 missed calls before 9 a.m., followed by a text marked urgent. Maya, several vendors are reporting payment delays. Can you please confirm status? We're getting close to deadlines. I made coffee, took my time, then called her back. She answered immediately, stress evident in her voice. Oh, thank God. Maya, I don't know what's happening, but the florist says your payment is on hold, and the cake designer just emailed me confused, and the transportation company is asking about timing details they already confirmed. Is everything okay with the account? I kept my voice calm, unbothered. Everything's fine, Rebecca. I'm just making sure all the details are exactly right before I release final payments. It's a lot of money and I want to be careful. Relief flooded her response. Of course, absolutely. I completely understand. Do you need me to help coordinate anything? Get confirmations from vendors? That would be helpful, I said. Can you have each vendor send me a detailed confirmation of services, timing, and deliverables? Just so I have everything documented. Absolutely. I'll send those requests today. She paused, then added, Maya, I have to say you've been incredible through this whole process. Most families are so scattered, but you've been on top of every detail. Derek and Hannah are lucky to have you. The irony wasn't lost on me. The wedding planner thought I was essential. My family thought I was optional. Thanks, Rebecca. Just want to make sure everything's perfect. We hung up and I sat with my coffee, watching the morning light fill my apartment. My phone buzzed again. Sophie, posting Instagram stories from the bachelorette party. Mimosas in Willamette Valley. Hannah wearing a white dress and a sash that said bride-to-be. Everyone laughing in a sun-drenched tasting room. Not a single mention of my absence. Not a text saying wish you were here. Just erasure, casual and complete. I opened my laptop and checked my email. Rebecca had already sent vendor outreach, and responses were starting to come in. The florist sent a detailed breakdown, professional and thorough. I read it carefully, found a small discrepancy in delivery timing, and wrote back asking for clarification. Payment still on hold. The cake designer sent photos of the design. The sugar flowers precise and beautiful. I zoomed in, noticed one tier was slightly different from the original mock-up, and asked if that was intentional. Payment still on hold. Each response bought me time, and each delay tightened the timeline for my family's perfect day. Sunday arrived quiet. I went to the farmer's market, bought fresh flowers for my apartment, made breakfast, read a book. My phone stayed silent until early afternoon, when my mother called. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. Hi, Mom. Her voice had that tight quality, forced cheerfulness over stress. Maya, honey, how are you? The question felt like performance. She'd never called just to ask how I was. I'm fine. What do you need? A small pause, recalculation. Well, I was talking to Derek and we feel terrible about the misunderstanding earlier. About the wedding. Misunderstanding. As if their words had been unclear, rather than perfectly explicit. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom. You told me not to come. Dad laughed and agreed. There's nothing unclear about that. We were just worried about stress levels, she said, voice rising slightly. You know how you get when you're overwhelmed. We thought giving you space would be helpful. This was a new tactic, reframing exclusion as consideration. I almost admired the creativity. That's thoughtful, I said, voice neutral. I appreciate you thinking of my stress levels. She brightened, hearing agreement where there was none. So you understand? And you'll still come? No, I said simply. I won't be attending. Silence longer this time. Maya, that's ridiculous. It's your brother's wedding. And you said I'd be a complication. I'm just respecting your wishes. We didn't mean. She started then stopped, clearly struggling. Look, Derek wants you there. Hannah wants you there. We all want you there. That's interesting, I said. Because when you uninvited me, nobody seemed to want me there. What changed? My mother's breathing changed on the other end of the line, that sharp intake that meant she was moving from persuasion to something harder. Maya, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude is exactly what we were concerned about. You're being selfish. This is Derek's day, not yours. Can't you just put your feelings aside for once and be there for your brother? The accusation landed exactly where she'd aimed it, that old wound of being too sensitive, too demanding, too focused on myself. Except this time, instead of absorbing it, I felt it bounce off something new. A boundary I hadn't known I was capable of building. I have put my feelings aside, I said quietly. For 9 years. I've shown up, helped out, funded things, and asked for nothing in return except to be treated like I mattered. And when it came time for something important, something I'd actually paid for, you told me I was better off absent. So I'm giving you what you asked for. Space. I could hear her breathing, the slight tremor that meant tears were coming. The weapon she'd always used when logic failed her. You're going to regret this, she said, voice breaking. When you're older and alone, you'll realize that family is all that matters, and you threw it away over pride. The words should have cut deeper. Maybe a week ago they would have. But sitting in my sunlit apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built entirely on my own merit, they felt hollow. I'm not throwing anything away, Mom. I'm just done picking up things other people keep dropping. I hung up before she could respond. The rest of Sunday passed in strange peace. I half expected another call, another attempt at manipulation disguised as reconciliation, but my phone stayed quiet. Either they were regrouping or they decided I wasn't worth the effort. Both options told me everything I needed to know. Monday morning brought a new wave of vendor emails, all responding to Rebecca's requests for detailed confirmations. I read each one carefully over my morning coffee, legitimately reviewing the information, asking follow-up questions where appropriate, and systematically keeping every payment in pending status. The band sent their set list, timing breakdown, and equipment needs. I noticed they'd listed cocktail hour as 45 minutes, but the original plan had been an hour. I emailed back asking for clarification, suggesting we might need to adjust their compensation if the timing had changed. Payment on hold. The photographer sent a minute-by-minute timeline for the day, including travel time between locations, setup requirements, and shot lists. I studied it, then asked about backup equipment protocols and what happened if weather forced ceremony changes. Payment. On hold pending his response. The caterer provided a comprehensive menu breakdown, serving timeline, and staffing plan. I cross-referenced it with the original proposal, found a slight variation in one of the appetizers, and requested confirmation that this was an approved substitution. Payment on hold. Each inquiry was legitimate, professional, exactly the kind of due diligence a responsible client should exercise. I wasn't being difficult. I was being thorough. But I was also watching the calendar, watching deadlines creep closer, watching the window for easy resolution narrow with each passing day. Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca called again. This time her voice carried genuine concern rather than just professional urgency. Maya, I need to be honest with you. We're entering critical timeline territory. Several vendors are asking about payment, and while I completely understand wanting everything perfect, we're at the point where delays could affect service delivery. Is there something specific you're concerned about? Something I can help resolve? I appreciated her directness. Rebecca had always been professional, competent, kind. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of family dysfunction. Rebecca, can I ask you something off the record? A pause. Of course. Did Derek or Hannah or anyone else in my family ever mention that I wasn't coming to the wedding? The silence that followed told me everything. What? She finally said, confusion genuine. They told me last week that I shouldn't attend, that my presence would create tension, that it would be better if I gave them space. They uninvited me from the wedding I've been planning and funding for 7 months. I heard her inhale sharply. Maya, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. That's completely inappropriate. So when you've been coordinating all these details with me, sending me updates, asking for my input on decisions, did anyone from my family ever indicate that I wasn't going to be there? Never, she said firmly. Every conversation I've had with your mother or Derek, they've mentioned you. Your mother keeps saying how proud she is that you're so successful, how helpful you've been. Derek talks about you like you're superwoman. I just assumed you were the organized sister who loved planning. The dissonance was almost funny. To Rebecca, I was valued family. To my actual family, I was a complication. They're very good at saying the right things to the right people, I said. But their actions tell a different story. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, careful. Maya, I'm going to say something that might be overstepping, and if it is, just tell me. But I've been doing this for 12 years and I've seen a lot of family dynamics. What you're describing sounds like they've been taking advantage of your generosity, while simultaneously resenting you for having resources they don't. It's more common than you'd think. I felt something loosen in my chest, the relief of being seen. That's exactly what it is. And now you're deciding whether to let this wedding happen, she said, not a question. I'm deciding whether to keep enabling a pattern that's made me invisible. I corrected. The wedding can happen. They just need to actually handle it themselves instead of assuming I'll take care of everything while being excluded from everything. Rebecca sighed. For what it's worth, I think you have every right to step back. But I also need to tell you that if payments don't clear by Thursday, We're going to start losing vendors. The florist is already asking about releasing your date because they have another wedding offering more for the same weekend. The band has a corporate event they could take instead. The photographer has been very patient, but his contract allows him to move on if payment isn't received within the specified window. I understand, I said, and I appreciate you being straight with me. What do you want to do? The same question Alex had asked. The question I'd been circling for days. I want them to acknowledge what they've done. I want them to see me as a person, not a resource. And if that's not possible, I want to stop pretending it doesn't hurt. Rebecca's voice was gentle when she responded. Those are completely reasonable things to want. I hope you get them. And Maya, for what it's worth, you've been one of the most thoughtful, organized, generous clients I've ever worked with. Your family is lucky to have you, whether they know it or not. We ended the call, and I sat with her words, with the strange validation of being valued by a professional stranger more than my own family. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Finally, after days of silence, my brother was reaching out. Hey sis, Mom said there's some confusion about the wedding. You're still coming, right? It won't be the same without you there. I stared at that message, at the casual dismissal of everything that had happened. Confusion. As if their explicit uninvitation had been some kind of misunderstanding. As if I was overreacting to a simple miscommunication. I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on simplicity. You told me not to come. I'm respecting that. 3 dots appeared immediately, the typing indicator showing he was crafting a response. They disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Finally, a message came through. That's not what we meant. We just thought you might be too stressed with work. We were trying to be considerate. There it was again, the reframing. The gentle gaslighting that turned exclusion into consideration. Rejection into kindness. Derek, I have the voicemail. Mom said I was too intense, that you wanted things simple, that my presence would create tension. Dad laughed and said I was too busy with work anyway. Those aren't words of consideration. Those are words of uninvitation. The typing indicator appeared and stayed for almost 2 minutes. Whatever he was writing was long, probably defensive, possibly angry. When it finally came through, it was shorter than I expected. Look, I don't want to fight. I want you at my wedding. Please just come. No apology. No acknowledgement of the hurt. Just a request for compliance, wrapped in the language of desire. I set my phone down without responding. Wednesday morning arrived with a new urgency. Rebecca sent an email with subject line urgent. Final payment deadline update. She'd attached a spreadsheet showing every vendor, their payment status, and their hard deadlines. Most were due by end of business Thursday. A few had grace periods extending to Friday morning. After that, contracts allowed for cancellation without refund of deposits. I'd already paid 60% of the total costs through deposits and initial payments. If vendors canceled now, that money was gone, and my family would be left scrambling to find replacements at the last minute, likely paying premium rates for the short timeline. Or they'd have no vendors at all. No flowers, no food, no music, no photos. Just an expensive venue and a lot of confused guests. The power of that realization sat heavy. I could genuinely destroy this wedding with inaction. Just by doing nothing, by not clicking approve, I could turn Derek's perfect day into a disaster. The vindictive part of me, the part that had been ignored and dismissed and erased for years, whispered that they deserved it, that this would teach them, that maybe public embarrassment was the only language they understood. But the larger part of me, the part that had built a successful business by being ethical and straightforward, knew that wasn't who I wanted to be. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. I wanted them to understand what they'd done, what they'd taken for granted, what they'd lost. Destroying the wedding would make me the villain in their story, confirming everything they decided about me being too intense, too controlling, too much. I opened my laptop and began composing an email. Not to my family but to Rebecca. Rebecca, I've made a decision about the payments. I'm going to approve everything by tomorrow morning, ensuring all vendors are paid on time and the wedding proceeds as planned. However, I need you to do something for me. When you confirm payments with vendors, please make it clear that all charges have been covered by Maya Chan, and that the family should direct any questions about wedding logistics or finances to me directly. I want a paper trail showing exactly who made this wedding possible. I sent it before I could second-guess myself, then immediately started a second email, this one to my family. I addressed it to all of them: Mom, Dad, Derek, Sophie, even Hannah. The subject line read simply, "Wedding payment confirmation." This email is to confirm that I will be processing all remaining wedding payments by end of day Thursday, ensuring Derek and Hannah's wedding proceeds as planned. All vendor contracts totaling $87,000 have been funded entirely by me. I've attached a complete breakdown of expenses for your records. While I was told my presence at the wedding would create tension and complications, I've decided that my personal feelings about being uninvited are less important than Derek and Hannah having the celebration they've planned. So the wedding will happen. The flowers will be there, the food will be served, the band will play, and the photographer will capture every moment. I just won't be there to see it. I hope you all have a beautiful day. Maya. I attached the expense spreadsheet, every line item documented, every receipt archived, every vendor listed with costs. Then I hit send and closed my laptop. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, from something closer to grief. I was letting go. Not just of the wedding, but of the fantasy I'd been holding on to. The fantasy that if I just gave enough, loved enough, showed up enough, they would finally see me the way I wanted to be seen. My phone started ringing within 3 minutes. My mother. I didn't answer. Derek. Declined. Sophie. Ignored. A group text started. Messages flying in rapid succession. Mom. Maya, we need to talk about this. You're being dramatic. Derek. Seriously? You're really not coming? Sophie. This is so embarrassing. What am I supposed to tell people? Hannah surprisingly sent a separate text just to me. Maya, I don't know everything that's happened, but I'm sorry you feel unwelcome. That was never my intention. Thank you for everything you've done. It was the first actual acknowledgement I'd received, and it came from the person I knew least. I responded simply, "Thank you, Hannah. I hope your day is everything you've dreamed of." The group text continued, my family spinning into panic and recrimination. My father joined, his message characteristically blunt. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Grow up and stop making everything about you." The irony of that statement, coming from a man who'd laughed at the suggestion I shouldn't attend a wedding I'd funded, was almost too much. I muted the conversation and put my phone face down. Thursday morning, I woke early and went through my normal routine. Shower, coffee, emails. I opened the wedding expense account and began approving payments, one by one. Each click felt like closing a door. The florist approved. The caterer approved. The band, the photographer, the cake, the transportation, all approved. I watched the funds transfer, watched my account balance drop, watched $87,000 move from my control into the execution of an event I'd never witness. When the last payment processed, I took a screenshot, sent it to Rebecca with a simple message. "Everything's confirmed. They're all set." She responded immediately. "Thank you, Maya. I'll make sure everything is perfect for them. And I'm sorry this is how it worked out." I closed my laptop and got ready for work, putting on my favorite suit, the navy one that made me feel competent and powerful. I had a full day of client meetings, and I was going to focus on the work that actually valued me. My phone continued buzzing throughout the morning, calls and texts I didn't answer. Around noon, my mother left a voicemail. I listened to it during my lunch break, sitting in my car in the parking garage. "Maya, I don't understand what you want from us. We've apologized. We've said you can come. We've tried to make things right, and you're still punishing us. This is cruel. You're hurting your brother on the most important day of his life. And for what? Because your feelings got hurt? Because we tried to be considerate of your stress levels? You're being selfish and vindictive, and honestly, I'm disappointed. I raised you better than this. Call me back so we can fix this before it's too late." I deleted the voicemail and sat in the quiet of my car, processing her words. In her version of events, I was the problem. I was the one being unreasonable, cruel, vindictive. The fact that they'd uninvited me was incidental. The fact that I'd funded everything was irrelevant. All that mattered was that I wasn't complying with their desires, and that made me the villain. It was clarifying in a painful way. No matter what I did, how much I gave, how clearly I explained, they would never see themselves as anything but victims of my unreasonable boundaries. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to a yoga class. Not the trendy hot yoga studios downtown, but a small community center class in my neighborhood, full of regular people just trying to stretch and breathe and find a little peace. I moved through poses in a room that smelled like sandalwood and old carpet, surrounded by strangers who didn't know anything about my family or my money or my complicated relationship with both. For an hour I was just a body in space, breathing in and out, finding balance. When I left, the spring evening had settled into that long Pacific Northwest twilight, the sky streaked with pink and gold. I walked home slowly, letting the cool air clear my head, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. My phone had stopped buzzing. Either they'd given up or they'd moved into strategy mode, planning their next approach. I didn't particularly care which. Friday morning, 2 days before the wedding, I woke to an unexpected email. It was from Hannah, sent at 3 in the morning, the kind of time that suggested insomnia and honesty in equal measure. Maya, I know it's late and you probably won't see this until morning, but I can't sleep and I needed to write this. Derek told me everything tonight. About the money, about the uninvitation, about all of it. I had no idea you'd paid for so much. I knew you were helping, but I thought it was like a few things here and there, not literally everything. And I definitely didn't know they told you not to come. Derek made it sound like you were too busy with work, like it was your choice. I feel sick about this. This whole wedding has been tainted by knowing how you've been treated. I tried to talk to your mom tonight, and she just kept saying you were overreacting, that you always make things difficult. But Maya, funding someone's entire wedding, and then being told you're too complicated to attend isn't overreacting. That's just being hurt by people who should know better. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to cancel everything, but Derek says that would be letting you win, which made me so angry I almost called off the wedding entirely. I don't want to start my marriage like this, standing on a foundation you built while you're excluded from it. But I also don't know how to fix it. Your family seems convinced they've done nothing wrong. And honestly, I'm starting to see sides of Derek I don't like very much. The entitlement, the dismissiveness, the way he talks about you like you're supposed to just fund his life because you can. I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know that at least one person sees how wrong this is. And I'm sorry. For all of it. Hannah. I read the email 3 times, sitting in my bed with morning light filtering through the windows. It was the most honest communication I'd received from anyone in my family's orbit, and it came from the person who had the least obligation to care. I wrote back carefully, weighing each word. Hannah, thank you for this email. It means more than you know to be seen and believed. I want you to know that my decision not to attend isn't about punishing you or Derek. It's about respecting the boundary your family set. Even if they're now trying to pretend they didn't set it. They told me I was too much, too intense, that my presence would complicate things. So I'm giving them exactly what they asked for, my absence. As for the money, I don't regret helping. I regret that my help was expected rather than appreciated, taken for granted rather than acknowledged. But that's not your burden to carry. You didn't know, and you weren't part of the decisions that led here. I hope your wedding day is beautiful. I hope your marriage is built on honesty and mutual respect and genuine partnership. And I hope that you and Derek figure out how to communicate better than his family has modeled, because you both deserve better than this dysfunction. Take care of yourself. Maya. I sent it and got ready for work, feeling a strange sense of completion. The wedding was tomorrow. Everything was paid for, confirmed, arranged. My family would have their perfect day, and I would have my peace. That was the trade I'd made, and I was learning to be okay with it. Friday at work was unusually busy, which I was grateful for. Client emergencies, system crashes, the kind of problems that required total focus and left no room for emotional processing. I worked through lunch, stayed late fixing a database issue for a client in crisis, and didn't check my personal phone until almost 8 p.m. 17 missed calls. 32 text messages. 6 voicemails. Something had happened. I scrolled through the texts first, trying to piece together the story. Sophie. Mom's in the hospital. Call us. Derek. Where are you? We need you. My mother's number, no message, just missed calls. My father, same. Then Rebecca Morrison, the wedding planner. Maya. Please call me when you can. There's been a development with the wedding. My stomach dropped. I called Rebecca first, she'd be the most objective. She answered immediately. Maya, thank God. Are you okay? I'm fine. What happened? She sighed long and tired. Your mother had some kind of episode this afternoon. Panic attack, maybe? Your dad called me in a panic saying they were at the emergency room and asking if we could postpone the wedding. I told him that at this point, with everything confirmed for tomorrow, postponement wasn't really possible without losing most of the vendors and all the deposits. He got angry, said you'd handle it, that you always handle it. I felt the familiar pull, that old instinct to drop everything and fix whatever crisis had emerged. But something had shifted in me over the past week. Something fundamental that wouldn't let me slip back into old patterns. What did you tell him? I asked Rebecca. I told him that all vendor contracts are finalized and paid, that postponement this late would mean losing everything, and that any changes would need to come from you since you're listed as the primary contact on all accounts. He started yelling about how you'd done this on purpose, how you'd orchestrated some kind of revenge plan. Maya, I need to ask you directly. Is your mother actually in the hospital? Or is this another manipulation? The question should have shocked me, but it didn't. Rebecca had seen enough family drama to recognize patterns. I honestly don't know, I admitted. I haven't spoken to them since I confirmed the payments yesterday. Let me make some calls and figure out what's actually happening. Okay. For what it's worth, if this is real and they need to postpone, I can work with vendors on rescheduling. It won't be cheap and we'll lose some deposits, but it's doable. But Maya, you need to know that your father explicitly said you'd cover any additional costs. He told me to send all rescheduling invoices to you. Of course he did. Even in crisis, even in emergency, I was still just the bank account. Don't commit to anything yet, I said. Let me figure out what's actually going on. I hung up and stared at my phone, at the list of missed calls from my family. Every instinct I'd spent 32 years developing screamed at me to call them back, to rush to the hospital, to fix whatever was broken. But I'd learned something this week. Their emergencies weren't always my emergencies. Their chaos wasn't always my responsibility. And my presence wasn't always helpful, sometimes it was just enabling. I called the only person I trusted to tell me the truth. Alex answered on the first ring. I was wondering when you'd call. I saw Sophie's post. What post? I heard clicking, Alex pulling up Instagram. She posted a photo from the hospital. About 2 hours ago. Your mom's in a bed, looking distressed, and the caption says family emergency the night before the wedding. Please send prayers. The comments are full of people asking what happened and Sophie responding with vague statements about stress and health scares. I closed my eyes, feeling the manipulation like a physical weight. So it's real enough for a hospital visit but performative enough for social media. Seems that way, Alex said carefully. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out what actually happened before I do anything. I hung up with Alex and called the one person who might give me straight information. Hannah. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick like she'd been crying. Maya. Hannah, I just heard about my mother. What actually happened? She let out a shaky breath. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. We were all at your parents' house for the rehearsal dinner planning, just family, going over final logistics for tomorrow. Your mom kept trying to call you, getting increasingly agitated that you weren't answering. She was saying things like Maya's going to ruin everything, and she's doing this to hurt us and working herself into this state. Your dad wasn't helping, he kept adding fuel, talking about how ungrateful you were, how you'd always been difficult. Hannah paused, and I heard her moving, probably finding privacy. Then Derek said something about how maybe they should just be honest with people, tell them you refused to come because you wanted attention. And your mom just lost it. Started hyperventilating, clutching her chest, saying her heart was racing. Your dad panicked and called an ambulance. So it was a panic attack, I said, brought on by anxiety about me not attending the wedding they uninvited me from. That's what it looks like, Hannah confirmed. The ER doctor said her heart is fine, her vitals are stable, and she's likely just experiencing acute stress. They wanted to keep her for observation, but she's insisting on leaving because of the wedding tomorrow. Maya, it's chaos here. Your dad is furious, Sophie's crying, Derek's bouncing between anger at you and panic about tomorrow. And your mom keeps saying she can't possibly do the wedding like this. I sat with that information, feeling the weight of their crisis but also the clarity of my decision. Hannah, I need you to hear me on this. What's happening to my mother is not my fault. I didn't cause her panic attack. I didn't create this situation. I simply stopped participating in a dynamic where I was valued for my money but not my presence. That they're struggling with the consequences of their own choices is not my emergency to fix. Hannah was quiet for a moment. You're right. You're absolutely right. I just feel so stuck in the middle of this. You're not in the middle, I said gently. You're marrying into it. And I think you need to decide right now what kind of family culture you're willing to accept, because this is what it looks like. Crisis, chaos, and someone always having to sacrifice their boundaries to keep everyone else comfortable. I heard her breath catch. I don't know if I can do this, Maya. The wedding, feels so wrong now. That's your choice to make, I said. But Hannah, if you do go through with it, do it because you love Derek and believe in your relationship. Don't cancel it because of me or my family's dysfunction. That's giving us too much power over your life. We talked for a few more minutes, and I gave her my blessing to make whatever decision felt right. When we hung up, I sat in my office, the city lights spreading out below, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, Derek called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this conversation needed to happen. Maya. His voice was rough, exhausted. Is Mom okay? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She's fine. Physically fine. They're discharging her in an hour. But Maya, this whole thing is falling apart. Mom's a mess, Dad's threatening to call off the wedding himself out of spite toward you. Sophie won't stop crying. And Hannah just told me she's having second thoughts. About everything. The wedding, me, all of it. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked. I need your help. There it was. The ask I'd been waiting for. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, just a need. With what specifically? I asked. I need you to come to the hospital. Talk to Mom. Calm her down. Help us figure out how to make tomorrow work. I know things have been complicated this week, but you're good at this stuff. You're good at managing chaos and making things happen. Please, Maya. I'm begging you. I felt the old familiar pull, the ingrained response to be needed, to be useful, to step in and solve. But I also felt something newer, stronger. Self-respect. Derek, let me ask you something. Why do you want me at the hospital? Because we need you. No. Why do you specifically want me there? Not what you need from me. Why me? He faltered. Because you're family. Because you're my sister. Am I? I asked quietly. Because a week ago, you and Mom and Dad all agreed I was too complicated to attend your wedding. That my presence would create tension. That things would be better, simpler, easier without me there. So which is it? Am I family when you need something and a complication when you don't? Silence stretched between us. I could hear hospital sounds in the background, beeping machines and distant conversations. That's not fair, he finally said. Isn't it? Derek, I've spent 9 years being your family when it was convenient. Paying for things, solving problems, showing up when you needed something. But when it came time for me to just exist in your life, to be present without being useful, I was too much. So no, I'm not coming to the hospital. I'm not calming Mom down. I'm not managing this crisis. You want it simple? Handle it simply. You wanted me out of the way? I'm out of the way. So you're really going to let everything fall apart? His voice rose, anger breaking through the exhaustion. You're going to let Mom suffer, and let my wedding be ruined because you're mad about some misunderstanding? It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said, my own voice hardening. You told me not to come. I have the voicemail. I have the text. You were explicit, clear, and unanimous. And now that there are consequences, now that you actually have to handle the event you planned, you want to call it a misunderstanding and make me responsible for fixing it. I'm not doing that anymore. This is who you really are, Derek said, venom creeping into his tone. Selfish. Vindictive. Holding your money over everyone's head and punishing us when we don't worship you for it. Dad was right about you. You can't stand that I'm happy, that I found someone, that my life is moving forward while you're still alone with your business and your empty apartment. The words were designed to hurt, to hit every insecurity I'd ever had about my choices, my life, my worth. A week ago they might have worked. But I'd spent the past 7 days examining my life honestly, and I'd realized something important. I wasn't empty. I was free. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said calmly. I hope tomorrow goes well for you. I hope Hannah decides to go through with it. And I hope someday you understand the difference between being alone and being at peace." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from doubt. From adrenaline, from the rush of finally speaking my truth without softening it for someone else's comfort. My phone immediately started ringing again. Derek. I declined the call. My mother. Declined. My father, his first direct call in days. Declined. A group FaceTime from all of them. Declined. I turned my phone to do not disturb and sat in the silence of my office, watching the city breathe below me. Somewhere out there my family was in crisis. Somewhere out there my brother's wedding hung in uncertain balance. Somewhere out there my mother was probably working herself into another panic attack. And I was here alone, and for the first time in years that felt like exactly where I needed to be. I left the office around 10, drove home through quiet streets, and poured myself a glass of wine. My phone showed 43 notifications, but I didn't look at them. Instead, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been thinking about for days. I drafted an email to my lawyer, Jessica Torres, outlining everything that had happened and asking her to draft a formal financial boundaries document. No more loans, no more gifts, no more funding family expenses without explicit written agreements. I wanted legal protection from my own impulse to say yes. When I finished, I sent it, then opened a new document and started writing. Not for them, for me. A record of everything I'd learned, everything I'd felt, everything I'd finally understood about family and obligation, and the difference between love and enabling. I wrote until my wine glass was empty and my eyes were heavy. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. Saturday morning arrived clear and bright, the kind of perfect late spring day that wedding planners dream about. I woke early, made coffee, and sat on my balcony watching the city wake up. Somewhere across town, my family was preparing for Derek's wedding. Hair and makeup, last-minute adjustments, photographs in morning light. The florist would be arriving at Riverside Gardens Estate, transforming the space with the peonies I'd paid for. The caterers would be prepping food in industrial kitchens. The band would be loading equipment, the photographer checking cameras, everything moving toward the ceremony that would start at 4 p.m. And I would be nowhere near it. My phone buzzed with a notification. Rebecca Morrison had sent a message at 7 a.m. Maya. Just wanted to let you know everything is on track for today. All vendors confirmed and on schedule. Your mother was discharged from the hospital last night, and the family has confirmed the wedding is proceeding. I don't know if this matters to you, but I thought you should know Hannah specifically asked me to thank you for making today possible. She said to tell you that she understands why you're not here, and she respects your decision. I hope you're doing something kind for yourself today. You deserve it. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Hannah got it. At least one person in that whole situation understood. I responded simply, "Thank you, Rebecca. Enjoy the beautiful weather. I'm sure it will be a lovely event." Then I did something I'd been planning since I made my final decision. I texted Alex. "Want to spend the day at the coast? My treat." They responded within minutes. "Absolutely. Pick you up in an hour." I showered, dressed in comfortable clothes, packed a bag with a book and sunscreen and a change of clothes. When Alex arrived, I climbed into their car and we headed west toward the ocean, leaving Portland and all its complications behind. We drove with the windows down, music playing, not talking about families or weddings or any of it, just driving toward open sky and salt air. We reached Cannon Beach around noon, that stretch of Oregon coast with its dramatic rock formations and endless sand. We walked barefoot along the waterline, the Pacific cold against our feet, and Alex finally asked the question I knew was coming. "How are you really doing?" I thought about it, watching waves collapse into foam. "I'm sad," I admitted. "But I'm also relieved. And I think the relief is winning." "Good," Alex said. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" I asked. "Because from their perspective, I'm the villain. I'm the one who abandoned family, who let money make me cold, who chose pride over connection." Alex stopped walking, turned to face me. "Maya, you didn't abandon anyone. You stopped allowing yourself to be used. There's a massive difference, and the fact that they can't see it tells you everything you need to know about whether your presence would have actually mattered." We spent the afternoon exploring tide pools, eating fish tacos at a beachside shack, reading in the sun. My phone stayed in my bag, silent and ignored. At 4 p.m., exactly when the ceremony was starting, I was standing in the surf, jeans rolled to my knees, feeling the pull of the ocean. I thought about Derek and Hannah, about my mother watching her son get married, about Sophie probably crying happy tears, about my father walking Derek down some metaphorical aisle. I thought about the flowers and the food and the music, all the details I'd agonized over, all coming together in a celebration I'd never witness. And I felt surprisingly okay. Not happy, not triumphant, but okay. I'd given them what they asked for. My absence. And I'd given myself something I'd needed for years. Permission to stop performing love through sacrifice. We stayed at the coast until sunset, watching the sky turn impossible shades of orange and pink. On the drive back to Portland, Alex played quiet music and I watched the landscape shift from ocean to forest to city. My phone had stayed off all day, and I dreaded turning it back on, dreaded the messages that were undoubtedly waiting. But when we pulled up to my building and I finally checked, there were fewer notifications than I expected. A few from unknown numbers, probably family friends who'd been told some version of events. One from Sophie, just a photo of her in her bridesmaid dress with the caption, "Wish you were here," which felt performative but possibly genuine. And one from Hannah, sent at 8:30 p.m., after the reception would have been well underway. "Maya, the wedding was beautiful. Everything you planned was perfect. The flowers were stunning, the food was incredible, the band made everyone dance. It was everything I dreamed of. But I kept thinking about you today, about how you made all of this possible and weren't here to see it." Derek and I had a long talk after the ceremony, before the reception. I told him that I can't start our marriage pretending this was okay, that the way his family treated you was wrong, and that if he wants our relationship to work, he needs to actually deal with his family dynamics instead of just expecting you to absorb them. He got defensive at first, but I think I got through to him. At least I hope I did. Anyway, I wanted you to know that you were missed today. Not for your money or your planning skills. Just you. Thank you for everything. I hope we can know each other better, outside of all this mess. Hannah. I read the message 3 times, feeling something complicated and bittersweet. Hannah had seen me. In the middle of her own wedding, surrounded by celebration, she'd thought about the person who wasn't there. That counted for something. I responded carefully. "Hannah, I'm so glad your day was beautiful. You deserved that. And I appreciate you saying something to Derek. Whether it changes anything remains to be seen, but the fact that you tried matters. I'd like to get to know you better too. Maybe coffee sometime, just us, away from family dynamics. Congratulations on your marriage. I'm rooting for you both." I sent it and set my phone down, feeling lighter. The wedding had happened. The world hadn't ended. My family had managed without me, which proved they could. And I had survived setting a boundary, which proved I could too. Sunday morning I slept late, made an elaborate breakfast, and finally looked through all the messages I'd been avoiding. Most were what I expected. My mother, oscillating between guilt trips and accusations. My father, angry and dismissive. Sophie, confused and hurt. But there was one I didn't expect. Derek had called at 11 p.m. the night of his wedding and left a voicemail. I almost deleted it without listening, but something made me press play. "Maya, it's me. I'm calling from the hotel. Hannah's asleep. And I'm sitting here thinking about everything. About today, about this week, about the past 9 years if I'm honest. Hannah said some things tonight that I didn't want to hear. About how we've treated you, about what we've taken for granted, about the difference between family and exploitation. I got mad at first, told her she didn't understand, that you'd always been okay with helping. But then she asked me when was the last time I'd asked how you were doing. Not what you could do for us, just how you were. And Maya, I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember a single time in recent years where I checked in on you just to check in. Every call, every text, every visit had an ask attached to it. And that's fucked up. That's really fucked up." He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry that you didn't come, that's your right. Sorry that we made you feel like you had to choose between funding our lives and being part of them. Sorry that I've been so focused on what you have that I forgot to see who you are. The wedding was perfect. Everything you planned, everything you paid for, it all came together beautifully. But you were right. Felt hollow knowing you weren't there. knowing we'd pushed you out. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back and fix things. I'm just saying I see it now. I see what we did. And I'm sorry." The voicemail ended. I sat with it, with his words, with the apology I'd wanted but never expected to receive. It didn't fix everything. One voicemail couldn't undo years of being taken for granted. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was seeing. I didn't call him back immediately. Instead, I spent the day taking care of myself. I went to the gym, meal prepped for the week, cleaned my apartment, organized my workspace. I did all the small maintenance tasks that made life feel manageable, grounded. Mine. Monday morning, I returned to work refreshed. My team welcomed me back with coffee and questions about my weekend, and I told them I'd spent it at the coast. Nobody asked about the wedding. Nobody knew the drama. Here I was, just Maya, the competent CEO who solved problems and built systems. Felt like relief. Around noon, my work phone rang. Rebecca Morrison. I answered, curious. "Maya, I wanted to follow up with you about something. I invoiced the family for my planning services this morning, and your mother called asking why the invoice wasn't sent to you. I explained that my contract was with Derek and Hannah, not you, and that they needed to handle payment. She seemed genuinely confused, like she'd assumed you'd pay for my services too." Rebecca paused. "I'm calling because I want you to know that I made it explicitly clear in my invoice notes that all other wedding expenses were covered by you, and that my services are separate. I listed out every vendor you paid for with totals. I wanted them to see in writing exactly what you did." I felt gratitude wash over me. "Thank you, Rebecca. That means more than you know. You deserve recognition," she said simply. "And honestly, I've been in this business long enough to know that what you did, stepping back while still ensuring the event succeeded, took more strength than most people have. You could have destroyed that wedding. Instead, you gave them what they wanted and kept your dignity. That's rare." We talked for a few more minutes, and she mentioned she'd be happy to work with me in the future. For any events actually about me. I laughed and thanked her, then got back to work. That evening, I finally responded to Derek's voicemail. I didn't call back. Instead, I sent a text. "I got your message. Thank you for the apology. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. I need space right now to figure out what relationship I want with this family going forward. But I appreciate you taking accountability. That takes courage." He responded almost immediately. "Take all the space you need. I understand. And Maya? I meant what I said. I'm sorry." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. My mother continued to call periodically, her messages slowly shifting from anger to confusion to something that might have been genuine remorse. She never quite apologized, but she stopped blaming me. My father remained silent, which was probably for the best. Sophie sent occasional texts, testing the waters, seeing if I'd respond. I did, but briefly, keeping things surface level. Derek and Hannah invited me to coffee 3 weeks after the wedding. I almost said no, but something made me say yes. We met at a neutral cafe in the Pearl District, and it was awkward at first. But Hannah broke the ice by showing me wedding photos and explicitly pointing out everything I'd chosen. "These flowers, you picked them. This table setup, your idea. The menu, your selection. Maya, you designed our entire wedding and we didn't even realize how much of it was you." Derek added quietly, "We've been working with a counselor. Couples therapy. But also, I'm doing some individual work on family stuff. On boundaries and expectations and all the ways I learned to use people. It's uncomfortable as hell, but Hannah insisted." "I did," Hannah confirmed. "Because I won't repeat these patterns in our marriage. And Derek's getting better at recognizing them." We talked for 2 hours, honest and difficult and sometimes painful. I didn't absolve them, didn't pretend everything was fine. But I listened. And I shared carefully what it had felt like to be erased from something I'd created. When we left, Derek hugged me. Not the perfunctory family hug, but a real one. "I'm working on being better," he said. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to do better going forward." "That's all anyone can do," I told him. In the months that followed, my relationship with my family slowly, carefully reconstructed itself on new terms. I drafted that financial boundaries document, and Jessica Torres had made it ironclad. No more funding without written agreements. No more gifts without clear expectations. No more being the family bank. Some of them resented it. My father called it cold and transactional, but Derek surprised me by supporting it. You should protect yourself, he said. We proved you need to. My mother struggled the most, unable to fully understand why I'd changed the rules. But she was trying in her way. She started calling occasionally just to talk, no requests attached. The conversations were stilted, awkward, but they were something. Sophie and I found our way to a friendship separate from family dynamics. She was in grad school now, funding it herself through scholarships and part-time work, and she'd apologize for being oblivious. I just always assumed you were fine, she'd said. You had money and success, so I thought you didn't need anything from us. I didn't realize that everyone needs to feel valued, regardless of their bank account. The biggest surprise was my relationship with Hannah. We started meeting for coffee regularly, just the two of us, and she became something like a friend. She'd talk about navigating Derek's family, and I'd share my perspective, and slowly we built something real. You know what's funny? She said once about 6 months after the wedding. I feel closer to you than to anyone else in that family. Maybe because you're the only one who doesn't need anything from me. I'd laughed. Welcome to the club. A year after the wedding, I was thriving. My business had expanded, I'd hired 3 new consultants, and I'd started dating someone I'd met through work. Someone who knew nothing about my family drama, who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I'd also started therapy, working through years of people-pleasing and boundary dissolution. My therapist asked me once what I'd learned from the wedding situation. I thought about it carefully. I learned that love without respect isn't really love. That family shouldn't be conditional on compliance. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience the consequences of their choices. And what about you? She asked. What did you learn about yourself? That I'm stronger than I thought. That I can survive disappointing people. And that my worth isn't measured by my usefulness. She smiled. That's significant growth. I still think about that wedding sometimes. About the moment I walked away, about the choice to stop enabling, about the family I had to lose in order to find myself. It wasn't a perfect ending. My relationship with my parents would probably always be complicated, careful, guarded. But it was honest now. Real. Built on mutual respect rather than unspoken obligation. And me? I was finally free. Free from the weight of unacknowledged sacrifice. Free from the need to prove my worth through my wallet. Free to build a life that was mine, not a supporting role in someone else's story. They told me not to come to the wedding. And in doing so, they'd given me something they never intended. Permission to stop showing up for people who wouldn't show up for me. It was the best gift they'd ever given me. Even if they still didn't realize it. I was Maya Chun. 32 years old, successful entrepreneur, loyal friend, and finally someone who understood that saying no wasn't selfish. It was survival. And I was just getting started. 2 years had passed since Derek's wedding, and my life had transformed in ways I never anticipated. The business had doubled in size, we'd moved to a larger office space with views of Mount Hood on clear days. And I'd been featured in Portland Business Journal as one of the city's emerging entrepreneurs under 40. The recognition felt good, not because I needed external validation anymore, but because it represented something I'd built entirely on my own terms. No family money, no borrowed credibility, just competence and persistence and the kind of focused determination that comes from finally understanding your own worth. The person I'd started dating, Cameron, had become something serious. We'd met at a tech conference where I was speaking on a panel about operational efficiency, and they'd approached me afterward with smart questions and genuine interest in the work itself, not the money it generated. Our first date lasted 6 hours, conversation flowing easily from business philosophy to books to the kind of childhood experiences that shape who we become. I told them about my family early on, not in dramatic detail but in honest strokes. They'd listened without judgment, then said something that stuck with me. It sounds like you had to lose them to find yourself. That's painful, but it's also brave. Cameron understood boundaries in a way my family never had, probably because they'd done their own work, their own therapy, their own reckoning with family dysfunction. We built our relationship on mutual respect and clear communication, and it felt revolutionary compared to the transactional dynamics I'd grown up with. My friendship with Hannah had deepened unexpectedly. She'd become pregnant 8 months after the wedding, and I'd been genuinely happy for her and Derek. When she asked me to be the baby's godmother, I'd been surprised and touched. "You're the person I trust most to show her what it looks like to have boundaries and self-respect," Hannah had explained. "Derek's family has a lot of beautiful qualities, but those aren't among them. I want her to have you as a model." The baby, a girl they named Claire, arrived on a rainy October morning, and I'd driven to the hospital with flowers and children's books, feeling nervous and honored in equal measure. Holding that tiny person, watching Derek be gentle and attentive in ways I'd never seen him be, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe acceptance. People could change. Growth was possible. It just required willingness and work. My relationship with Derek had settled into something cautious but real. He'd continued therapy, both individual and with Hannah, and he'd made genuine efforts to understand the patterns he'd inherited. We met for lunch once a month, just the two of us, conversations that were sometimes stilted but increasingly honest. He'd apologized multiple times in different ways, as he understood more layers of what had happened. "I didn't just take your money," he'd said once about a year after the wedding. "I took your presence for granted. I assumed you'd always be there, always say yes, always make things easier. And when you finally said no, I couldn't handle it because I'd never actually learned to handle things myself." It was the kind of insight that couldn't be forced, only arrived at through genuine self-examination. I appreciated him sharing it, appreciated seeing him try. Sophie had graduated and moved to Seattle for a job in graphic design. We texted regularly now, a friendship that felt more authentic without the weight of family dynamics constantly pressing on it. She'd visited Portland twice in the past year, staying with me, and we'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Over wine one evening, she'd asked me about the wedding, about what I'd felt when I made the decision not to attend. "Honestly," I'd said. "Relief." Underneath all the hurt and anger, there was this enormous relief that I finally had permission to stop performing. They'd explicitly told me not to come, so I didn't have to twist myself into knots trying to figure out how to show up right. Sophie had nodded slowly. "I think I get it now. At the time I thought you were being dramatic. But I've been in therapy too, working through stuff, and I'm starting to see how much we all just expected you to absorb. Like you were infinite, like you didn't have limits or feelings or needs." My mother remained the most complicated relationship. She'd never fully apologized, never completely understood what she'd done wrong, but she'd stopped making demands. Our phone calls were brief and superficial. Updates about weather and health and nothing substantial. I'd made peace with that being the extent of what we'd have. Some people couldn't do the work of genuine reconciliation, and I'd stopped waiting for her to become someone she wasn't. My father and I barely spoke. He'd never acknowledged his part in any of it, never softened his stance that I'd been unreasonable. I'd accepted that too. Not everyone in your life deserves access to all of you. And sometimes the healthiest choice is minimal contact. We were cordial at family gatherings, distant but not hostile, and that was enough. The financial boundaries document Jessica had drafted proved essential. My family had tested it a few times in the first year, small requests wrapped in emergency language, and I'd held firm. If it's truly an emergency, let's document it properly, agree on terms, and make it official, I'd say. Most of the requests evaporated under that scrutiny, proving they weren't actually emergencies, just wants disguised as needs. The one exception had been my mother's car repair, a legitimate issue that left her without transportation. I'd helped, but with a written agreement about repayment terms. She'd been offended initially, but she'd also paid me back over 6 months, small amounts but consistent. It established a new pattern, one where help came with structure and respect. I'd started using some of my money differently too. Not for family obligations but for causes and people I genuinely wanted to support. I'd funded scholarships for first-generation college students studying business. I'd invested in women-owned startups. I'd donated to organizations supporting financial literacy in underserved communities. Using my resources for these purposes felt clean, purposeful, free of the emotional manipulation that had tainted family giving. Cameron had introduced me to their chosen family, a group of friends who'd known each other since college and functioned as genuine support system. Spending time with them showed me what healthy relationships looked like. People who celebrated each other's successes without jealousy, who showed up during hard times without keeping score, who could be honest without being cruel. It was revelatory seeing that families, whether biological or chosen, could operate from abundance rather than scarcity. One Saturday afternoon, about 18 months after the wedding, Derek called asking if he and Hannah could come by. They arrived looking nervous, and I made tea while we settled in my living room, afternoon light streaming through the windows. "We wanted to talk to you about something," Hannah started, glancing at Derek. He picked up the thread. "We're planning Claire's baptism, and we want to do it right this time. Not the planning, though Hannah's handling that, but the family dynamics part." I waited, curious where this was going. "We're having a small ceremony, just close family and friends," Hannah continued. "And we wanted to ask if you'd be there as her godmother, but also we wanted to tell you about some boundaries we're setting with the family." Derek leaned forward. "We've told Mom and Dad that if they want to be involved in Claire's life, they need to treat people with respect. All people, but especially you. We told them that the way they handled the wedding, the way they've treated you for years, isn't acceptable, and we won't expose our daughter to those patterns." I felt my throat tighten. "What did they say?" Hannah smiled slightly. "Your mom cried and said she didn't understand what she'd done wrong. Your dad got defensive and said we were being manipulated by you." But Derek held firm. "I told them they could do the work of understanding, maybe get some therapy themselves, or they could have limited access to their granddaughter," Derek said. "It wasn't easy. Dad hung up on me. Mom called back 3 times trying to negotiate, but we didn't budge." "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. Derek exhaled slowly. "Terrified and relieved in equal parts. Terrified because I've never stood up to them like that. Relieved because I'm finally breaking the cycle instead of passing it on. Hannah's been incredible, supporting me through it but not letting me backslide. We want Claire to grow up understanding that love includes respect," Hannah added. "That boundaries are healthy. That family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. And we want her to see that modeled, especially by the people closest to her." I looked at these 2 people, at the family they were building with intention and courage, and I felt proud. Not just of them, but of the choice I'd made 2 years ago. Walking away from that wedding had created space for this, for actual change instead of performed reconciliation. "I'd be honored to be at the baptism," I said. "And I'm really proud of you both for setting those boundaries. It's not easy, especially with parents." Derek met my eyes. "I learned it from you. Watching you walk away taught me that it's possible to love people and still protect yourself from them. That you can care about family and still refuse to be diminished by them." The baptism happened on a mild spring day, small and intimate. My parents were there, noticeably subdued, uncertain how to navigate the new dynamics. My mother tried to pull me aside at one point, clearly wanting to talk, but I kept the interaction brief and polite. "Not today, Mom. Today is about Claire." She'd looked hurt, but she'd nodded and backed off. Progress of a sort. Sophie had flown in from Seattle, and we stood together during the ceremony, watching Derek hold his daughter with a tenderness that suggested he was doing the work of being different. After the service, during the small reception at Derek and Hannah's house, Cameron found me in the kitchen refilling drinks. "Your family is fascinating," they said, not unkindly. "I can see all the dynamics you've described playing out in real time. Your mom keeps trying to insert herself into conversations. Your dad's holding court in the corner, acting like nothing's wrong. But Derek and Hannah are doing a good job maintaining boundaries." "They're trying," I agreed. "It's new for them, so it's still effortful. But they're trying." Cameron wrapped an arm around my waist. "And you? How are you doing with all this?" I considered the question honestly. "I'm okay. It's still complicated, still imperfect. But I'm not responsible for fixing it anymore. And that makes all the difference." The biggest shift came about 6 months after Claire's baptism. My mother called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual. Our calls typically happened on Sunday afternoons, brief and scheduled. "Maya, do you have time to talk?" Her voice was different, less performative, more uncertain. "Sure, what's up?" She took a breath. "I've started seeing someone. A therapist. Derek suggested it, said it might help me understand some things. And I've been going for a few months now, and we've been talking about you. About our relationship, about the wedding, about everything." I sat down, unprepared for this. "Okay. I need to say some things, and I need you to just let me say them without interrupting, because if I stop I might lose my nerve." Her voice wavered. "Can you do that?" Yes, I said quietly. I was wrong. About the wedding, about how we treated you, about so many things over the years. My therapist has been helping me see how I used you, how I took advantage of your success and your generosity and your inability to say no. And the worst part is I resented you for it. I resented that you had resources I didn't, that you built something I couldn't, that you seemed fine without the things I'd been taught were essential like marriage and children. She paused and I heard her crying softly. The wedding was the culmination of all of that. You'd paid for everything and instead of being grateful I was angry that you had the money to pay. Angry that Derek needed your help instead of ours. Angry that you were successful in ways I didn't understand. So when your dad made that joke about you being too intense, too complicated, I agreed. I told myself we were protecting Derek's day, but really I was protecting my own ego. I didn't want to spend the wedding being reminded that you'd made it possible. I stayed quiet, honoring her request, feeling tears on my own cheeks. When you said you wouldn't come, when you walked away, I was furious. I told myself you were being petty, vindictive, selfish. I couldn't see that you were just protecting yourself from people who'd hurt you. People like me. And then when you still paid for everything, when you made sure the wedding happened even though we'd excluded you, I didn't know what to do with that. It didn't fit my narrative of you being the problem. She took a shaky breath. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to forget what happened or pretend we're okay. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see how I failed you, not just at the wedding but for years before that. And I'm sorry. I'm deeply, truly sorry. Silence stretched between us. I wiped my eyes, trying to find words adequate to the moment. Thank you for telling me that, I finally said. It means more than you probably realize. I don't expect anything to change, she continued. I know I've damaged our relationship probably beyond repair. But I wanted you to know that I'm working on being different. Not for you but for me. Because I don't want to be the person who drives away her own daughter. We talked for another hour. The longest genuine conversation we'd had in years. She asked about my life, my business, Cameron, actually listening to the answers instead of waiting for her turn to talk. It wasn't perfect, wasn't a magical healing moment, but it was real. When we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, processing everything. Cameron came home from a late meeting and found me still sitting in the same spot. You okay? They asked. I nodded. My mom apologized. Actually apologized with awareness and accountability and everything. How do you feel about that? Hopeful, I said. And scared. Because what if she means it? What if she actually does the work and becomes someone I can have a real relationship with? That feels almost harder than accepting that we'd never be close. Cameron sat beside me. Change is terrifying, even positive change. But you don't have to decide anything right now. You can just let it unfold and see what happens. They were right. I didn't have to forgive immediately or trust completely or throw open doors I'd carefully closed. I could let my mother prove through sustained action, not just words, that she'd changed. And in the meantime, I could protect myself while remaining open to possibility. Over the next year, my mother continued therapy and continued showing up differently. She asked before offering advice. She respected when I said no. She started paying for things herself instead of assuming I'd cover them. She called to check in without wanting anything. Slowly, carefully, we built something new. Not the relationship I'd wished for as a child, but something honest and adult and mutual. My father never did the work. He remained distant, defensive, convinced he'd done nothing wrong. I made peace with that, understanding that some people are too invested in their own narratives to consider alternative perspectives. We maintained polite distance at family gatherings, and I stopped hoping for more. Sophie and I grew closer as she did her own work, examining how family patterns had shaped her. She apologized more than once for her obliviousness during the wedding situation, for posting on social media about family emergencies without checking if I was okay, for assuming I was fine because I was successful. I think I saw you as invincible, she'd said, which is a terrible thing to do to someone you love, because nobody's invincible. Everyone needs support. Derek and Hannah's marriage seemed to strengthen as they navigated parenthood and continued their therapeutic work. Derek had become someone I genuinely respected, not just loved out of obligation. He'd done the hard work of examining his entitlement, his assumptions, his learned behaviors. Claire was growing into a curious, joyful toddler, and I cherished my role in her life. Being her godmother meant more than religious ceremony. It meant being a person she could count on, someone who would show up consistently, someone who modeled healthy boundaries and self-respect. 3 years after the wedding, Cameron and I got engaged. We talked about marriage carefully, examining what it meant to us, what we wanted it to look like, how we'd navigate family dynamics. When Cameron proposed on a quiet evening at home, no performance or spectacle, just sincere question and hopeful answer, I'd said yes with complete certainty. Planning our wedding was a revelation. We did it together, making decisions based on what we actually wanted rather than what would impress others or meet expectations. We kept it small, intimate, just the people who genuinely supported us. My family was invited with clear boundaries about behavior and respect. My mother helped with flowers, taking direction graciously, showing up when she said she would. Derek gave a toast that made me cry, talking about lessons learned and growth earned and how proud he was to see me happy. Sophie designed our invitations, beautiful watercolor work that captured something essential about who Cameron and I were together. My father attended but stayed quiet, which was probably the best we could hope for. Hannah wrangled toddler Claire while still managing to catch my eye during the ceremony and mouth, "I'm so happy for you." The wedding was everything Derek should have been. Not because it was more expensive or more elaborate, but because it was built on foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. Every person there wanted to be there. Every element reflected our values. Every moment felt authentic. And when it was over, when Cameron and I drove away toward our honeymoon, I felt nothing but joy. No resentment, no comparison, no bitterness about the past. Just presence in my own beautiful moment. We honeymooned in New Zealand, 2 weeks of hiking and quiet, and being completely disconnected from normal life. On our last evening, watching the sun set over Queenstown, Cameron asked me if I ever regretted walking away from Derek's wedding. I thought about it carefully. No, I said. It was the most important thing I've ever done for myself. It broke a pattern that was destroying me. It forced everyone, including me, to examine what we were doing and why. And it created space for actual change instead of just endless repetition of the same dynamics. Do you think they would have changed if you'd just gone to the wedding and stayed quiet? No, I said with certainty. They would have learned that they could treat me however they wanted and I'd still show up, still pay, still enable. Walking away was the only thing that could have created actual consequences, and consequences are the only thing that forces growth. Cameron squeezed my hand. I'm glad you did it, because it brought you to yourself and eventually to me. We flew back to Portland, back to our life, back to the business and the routines and the chosen family we'd built. But something had shifted during those weeks away. I'd gained clarity about what I wanted next, not just in my business but in my life. I'd been so focused on proving I was okay, on building success and establishing boundaries and protecting myself, that I'd lost sight of what brought me joy beyond survival. I started making changes. I promoted one of my senior consultants to COO, giving her operational control while I stepped back into more strategic work. I started painting again, something I'd loved as a teenager but abandoned as impractical. I volunteered with a youth mentorship program, helping first-generation students navigate business school applications. I said no to things that didn't serve me and yes to things that sparked genuine interest. And I prioritized my relationship with Cameron, with our chosen family, with the people who'd proven through consistent action that they valued me. 4 years after Derek's wedding, I found myself back at Riverside Gardens Estate. Not for a family event, but for a client's corporate retreat. Walking through the venue where Derek and Hannah had gotten married felt surreal, triggering memories I'd worked hard to process. The oak trees still had fairy-like infrastructure. The fountain still played that delicate music. The gardens were still stunning, but I felt nothing but peaceful distance. This was just a beautiful venue. It had no power over me. During a break in the retreat, I walked down to the lakeside area where the ceremony had taken place. Stood in the spot where Derek and Hannah would have exchanged vows, where my family had celebrated without me, where everything had changed. And I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd had the strength to walk away. Grateful that my absence had created space for growth. Grateful that the pain had led to transformation. I pulled out my phone and texted Derek. I'm at Riverside Gardens for a work thing. Standing where you got married. Just wanted you to know that I'm okay. More than okay. And I'm grateful for how everything worked out, even though it was hard. He responded within minutes. That means everything. I'm grateful too. For your strength, for your boundaries, for not giving up on us completely even when we deserved it. Love you, sis. I smiled, pocketed my phone, and walked back to the retreat. My life wasn't defined by what had happened at this venue 4 years ago. It wasn't defined by my family's dysfunction or my history of enabling or the moment I finally said enough. It was defined by what I'd built after, by the choices I made every day to honor myself, by the relationships I nurtured and the boundaries I maintained and the joy I cultivated. That evening, Cameron and I had dinner with Alex and their partner, easy conversation and good food, and the kind of laughter that comes from being completely yourself with people who love you for it. Alex raised a glass halfway through the meal. A toast to Maya, who taught all of us what it looks like to choose yourself without apology. We clinked glasses, and I felt the truth of it settle in my bones. I had chosen myself. After years of choosing everyone else, of making myself small and convenient and endlessly available, I'd finally chosen myself. And everything good in my life had grown from that single terrifying necessary choice. The wedding that I didn't attend had become the best thing that never happened to me. It had forced a reckoning I'd needed for years. It had revealed truths I'd been avoiding. It had broken patterns that were slowly destroying me. And it had set me free. Free to build a life based on mutual respect instead of obligation. Free to love people without diminishing myself. Free to use my resources in ways that felt clean and purposeful. Free to be seen not for what I could provide but for who I was. My family had laughed when my father joked that I was too complicated for Derek's wedding. They'd agreed when he said I was better off absent. And in their cruelty, in their casual dismissal, they'd given me permission to finally let go of the fantasy that I could earn their love through endless sacrifice. I couldn't. Love doesn't work that way. Real love, healthy love, doesn't require you to erase yourself. It invites you to be fully present, fully yourself, fully valued. And if the price of that love is being excluded from events you funded and planned, if the cost of self-respect is disappointing people who took you for granted, then it's a price worth paying. Because on the other side of that payment is freedom. And freedom, I'd learned, was worth everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.